Somewhere in the world today, someone in their 30s will hear 4 words no one that age expects to hear. You have colon cancer. That is not supposed to happen. Colorectal cancer has always been thought of as an older person's disease, something that shows up after 60, maybe 70. But something has shifted. Doctors around the world have started noticing the same strange pattern. More people under 50 are being diagnosed than a generation ago, and nobody is entirely sure why. In several countries, rates of early-onset colorectal cancer have been climbing by a few percent every single year for more than a decade, the kind of small yearly increase that compounds into something much bigger once you stack a decade of it together. So what changed? Genetics do not shift that fast, not in just a few decades. Something about how we live now, something new in modern life, has to be part of the answer. And when researchers go looking for a culprit, one thing keeps showing up at the scene of the crime. What is sitting on our plates? Meat has been part of the human diet for longer than farming itself, longer than written history. For most of that time it was rare, seasonal, something worth celebrating. That changed fast. After the middle of the last century, industrial farming made meat cheap and constant for the first time ever. Freezers, supermarkets, fast food counters, meat stopped being an occasion and became a daily default. By the end of the 20th century, people in wealthy countries were eating far more meat, and far more processed meat specifically. Sausages, cold cuts, bacon, than any generation before them. And processed meat is not just red meat that got sliced up. Curing, smoking, salting, adding preservatives, those processes themselves can create compounds that were not in the original cut of meat at all. Nitrites are one example. They keep cured meat pink, stop dangerous bacteria from growing, and extend shelf life by weeks. Useful chemistry. But under certain conditions inside the body, they can also form compounds linked to cancer. That distinction between meat itself and what happens to it on the way to your plate turned out to matter more than almost anyone expected. Then in 2015, the story took a turn that made headlines around the entire planet. The world's leading cancer research agency reviewed the evidence on red and processed meat and made an announcement that stopped people mid-bite. Processed meat, they said, causes cancer. Full stop. Not probably. Not maybe. The same level of certainty used for tobacco smoke and asbestos. So here is a question worth sitting with for a second. Does that actually mean a hot dog carries the same cancer risk as a cigarette? It sounds like it should, given they landed in the exact same official category. But that is not what the classification actually measures. That system groups things by how confident scientists are that something causes cancer at all, not by how dangerous it is per bite or per cigarette. Processed meat and cigarettes share a shelf because the evidence linking each of them to cancer is equally solid, not because a sausage is anywhere near as deadly as a pack of cigarettes. Smoking is responsible for the overwhelming majority of lung cancer cases worldwide. Processed meat's contribution to colorectal cancer, while real, sits at a small fraction of that scale. The confidence level was the same. The actual danger was nowhere close. And that single mix-up sent a wave of panic through supermarkets that the science itself never intended. But if processed meat is not remotely as dangerous as a cigarette, why do health agencies still tell everyone to cut back? The real answer says less about panic and more about probability. Because probability is exactly what these numbers describe. When scientists say something raises cancer risk, they are talking about shifting odds across an entire population, not sealing any one person's fate. For any single person, a burger on a Tuesday does not write a diagnosis. It is the pattern, repeated for decades across millions of people, that adds up to a real, visible signal. Which is exactly why the usual advice, just stop eating red meat, has never really worked. Health agencies have been urging people to cut back on red and processed meat for years now. Global consumption keeps climbing anyway, year after year. It turns out telling someone to give up something tied to family dinners, culture, and comfort is a lot easier to say than it is to actually do. There is also a deeper problem hiding underneath the advice itself. Most nutrition guidance comes from watching what people already eat, not from controlling it in a lab like a drug trial. You cannot ethically assign thousands of people to eat bacon every day for 30 years just to see what happens. So scientists have to work with the messy, imperfect diets people choose on their own. That is part of why nutrition headlines flip-flop so often. Coffee is bad, then good. Eggs are dangerous, then fine again. The underlying science is harder than it looks from the outside. So a different question started forming among the people who study this for a living. What if the goal was not zero? What if a small, realistic swap was enough to matter? Trade a little meat for a little something else. It sounds almost too simple to be worth studying seriously. But nobody had actually tracked that properly in real people for decades until recently. If stories like this, ordinary food habits turning out to carry more nuance than the headlines suggest, are the kind of thing you enjoy, hit subscribe. We dig up a new one every week. Now, back to the part nobody had actually pinned down yet. How much of a swap does it really take to move the needle on real cancer risk? You cannot answer that by asking people what they eat once and guessing. You need to follow the same people, eating their normal everyday diets for a very long time, and watch what actually happens. That is an enormous undertaking. It means recruiting tens of thousands of ordinary adults, tracking their meals for decades, and waiting, sometimes most of a lifetime, to see who develops cancer and who does not. It also means resisting the temptation to just compare extremes, strict vegetarians against heavy meat eaters, and instead asking a far more useful question. What happens with the small changes people might actually make? One of the clearest answers came from a part of the world where meat has always been a staple of the table, not an occasional treat. For decades, that region had already been quietly collecting exactly the kind of information this question needed. Detailed food diaries from ordinary people, linked to national health records tracking every cancer diagnosis for almost 30 years. Almost 30 years of data, tens of thousands of people, and buried inside all of it was an answer to the exact question this video opened with. Not whether meat causes cancer. The world already had a rough answer to that. The real question was whether cutting back just a little, not going vegetarian, not swearing off burgers forever, changes anything measurable. So what actually happened when researchers spent nearly 30 years tracking real people's real diets, waiting to see if those small swaps made any difference at all? People who traded out a small weekly portion of red meat, something like one small steak's worth, for vegetables or fruit, ended up with a modestly lower chance of developing colorectal cancer over the following decades. It was not a dramatic drop. Nobody's risk got cut in half, but it was real. It was consistent, and it showed up again and again across the data. Processed meat told a slightly different story. Trading out just half a sausage's worth a week for something plant-based barely moved the needle for most people. Only the smallest sliver of a difference. Except for one group. People who were already eating less whole grain bread and cereal than average saw a much bigger payoff, cutting their risk by close to a tenth when they swapped meat for whole grains specifically. For everyone else, that particular swap made almost no difference at all, which tells you something important. How much a change helps you can depend entirely on what your diet already looks like. And the effect was not fixed either. When people made a bigger swap, doubling the amount of meat they traded out, the benefit roughly doubled along with it. Which suggests this is not some fixed threshold you either clear or miss. It behaves more like a dial. Turn it a little, get a little back. Turn it more, get more. That kind of clean, steady relationship is genuinely rare in nutrition science. Most diet and disease links are noisy and inconsistent from one study to the next. A pattern this orderly is part of why researchers took the findings seriously. One finding genuinely surprised the researchers. They expected swapping meat for beans and legumes to lower risk too. Instead, in this particular population, it looked linked to slightly higher risk, which made no sense at first. The likely explanation was not the beans themselves. It was how they are traditionally eaten in that region, often in a hearty soup cooked with pork. The dish, not the legume, was probably driving the number. It is a small reminder that food never travels alone on a plate. What something is eaten alongside can matter just as much as the ingredient a headline focuses on. None of this proves, on its own, that a single sandwich directly causes cancer, or that a single apple directly prevents it. People reported their own diets just once, at the very start of decades of follow-up, and real life is messier than any questionnaire. What it does do is add real, lived weight to something health agencies have been saying for years, with less hard evidence behind it than most people assumed. Which brings the story back to that opening question: colorectal cancer showing up earlier in more people's lives, for reasons still not fully understood. Diet will never be the whole answer, but this research suggests it might be a bigger and far more fixable piece of the puzzle than most people assume. You do not have to give up the burger, you just have to occasionally let something else win.